let's try and make this a little quick, and not only quick, but we got to, unfortunately, because of the subject matter, we got to tread a little lightly. But it's major headlines, not only in the NFL, but also really just in pop culture right now. And it's the whole Colin Kaepernick taking a knee and not involving himself in the national anthem. There's a lot of politics behind that. There's a lot of emotion behind that. There's a lot of, whatever else you want to say, racial tension. There's all kinds of issues that are underneath the surface here. I'm going to start with Scott because he's also writing a post on this topic, but it is very prevalent. It is something that a lot of people are talking about right now. What are your thoughts? Agree, disagree? Maybe you have a different stance outside of the politics type of arena. What are your thoughts about what Colin Kaepernick's doing and the trickle-down effect, both positive and negative? Mostly negative, I think, in terms of his reputation from doing this. What just kind of some base thoughts and what you're basing your post on with this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were negative. I think one interesting thing is that you go back to 2011 and Dalton and Kaepernick, and we have Dalton obviously, are always going to be kind of linked together, especially with Bengals fans, because they were drafted back to back. When they were drafted, there was the kind of the rumor that kind of leaked out that, the Bengals were leaning Kaepernick, Mike Brown wanted Kaepernick, Gruden convinced him to go the other way, and Kaepernick had the early success, went to the Super Bowl. So there's always going to be that tie between the two until they retire. And years later, we can say the one is better. And after the early part of their career, I know on Cincy Jungle, we had a lot of people grumbling, saying, I can't believe, we passed on Kaepernick. How could we pass on Kaepernick? Look at how great he's And you look at him now, and their careers couldn't be further apart. And same with what's happening on the field. They can't be further apart. The only thing we really know about Dalton off the field is he likes Christian music, and he wears a rubber ring for a wedding ring. That's kind of the two things we really know about Dalton.
And he lost his luggage.
Yeah, apparently.
Luggage Gate 2016.
Yeah, apparently he needs to learn the whole bungee cord thing to strap it on the top of the roof or whatever happened. So, he seems like a pretty clean cut, low profile kind of guy. Kaepernick obviously has taken it a different direction with the really big stand. And I think it raises some really good questions, and even the president kind of weighed in on it over in China. And I think one of the things that a lot of people really haven't looked at, one angle or perspective to kind of look at it, is kind of where this is happening and the debate that really isn't happening of whether is it appropriate or not appropriate to do this in this venue or in this location. Because you kind of look at, the whole idea of America has always been, you're allowed to assemble and free speech and, assemble in the public square, and you have the big marches at the National Mall and people get together and protest and have sit-ins and boycotts and all that kind of stuff. And that's one thing. This is a little different because it's happening at an NFL game. So you're an employee, you're at an employer event, you have people who are paying to come to this. So it's not really, the same thing as like public square. It's not town square. It's a private venue where you're kind of, people who are there are paying. They aren't really paying to see you make a protest. They're there to watch you play football. And so it kind of raises the question of, is this an appropriate spot or is it not? And I think we all probably have different views on that. And then you have the idea of, by rejecting the flag and the anthem, one of the big backlashes he seemed to get was most people tend to tolerate, if you want to reject a particular thing about this country, whether it be, taxes, or I think a lot of people, there's a lot of divisive issues, religion, abortion, whatever. There's many things that are very divisive, and you tend to see people reject or protest those particular things. But when you reject something like the flag and the anthem, those are symbols of the whole country. So you're kind of at least visibly looking like you're rejecting the whole country. I know it's not what he's doing, but that's, what you initially see. A lot of the initial backlash was based on that you're rejecting the symbols of this country and everything it stands for, and even your right to make the protest. So I just think those are very interesting things that kind of get overlooked. The whole focus has been on the content, which is obviously what he's trying to do, get the talk on the content. But I just figure, being an NFL game, and the venue, it's one aspect we're not really looking at is it acceptable? Is it not in this particular venue in this context? So I'll open up to you guys and see what you guys think of that.
Connor, additional thoughts?
I mean, I have to disagree with you a little bit, Scott, in the sense that the coverage has been more on the message. I think initially the biggest issue I had with this whole situation was that Kaepernick is, sitting at a national anthem. I mean, this wasn't even until the second or third game that he started the protest, I should say in quotes, that he even is doing it. Because ultimately, how many people at a game are walking or talking on the phone or not paying attention during the national anthem? Ultimately, I think what it comes down to is, from my personal opinion, obviously, the national anthem is something that it's a symbol of our freedom, but I don't think it's necessarily that. I think that paying tribute to the country via, singing the national anthem, putting your hand over your heart, is a tribute to the freedom that like our soldiers have, earned us. But I ultimately, I think that that's not exactly a representation of that's how we honor the military. And I think that the whole hashtag Veterans for Kaepernick movement kind of opened people's eyes to that, in that veterans, some people will agree with Kaepernick, and that's okay. And that's what I think makes our country great, is the fact that we're allowed to disagree with each other, and we're not going to go to jail over the fact that we don't agree on the exact same issue. Ultimately, what I think is that Kaepernick's making a stand, and yeah, it's at an NFL venue, and people are going to the games, but is anyone actually watching Kaepernick sit down? I mean, people weren't watching him sit down until cameras were taking pictures of him sitting down. So I think it sparked conversation, and it accomplished what Kaepernick wanted to do, and he backed that up by donating $1 million of his own money, which is a lot of money regardless of how much money you're making. So I mean, I like the move, and I encourage anyone who is interested by the issue still today, check out what Uncle Chaps wrote, a former SB Nation correspondent, now with Barstool Sports. He's a Purple Heart recipient, and he wrote a great column, I think, on Barstool Sports. You can check that out if you just probably Google it. And I also think that the video of what Kaepernick is saying to the media in terms of what he's standing up for, / I should say sitting down for here, I think that's something that got glanced over. I think that what Kaepernick actually has to say is just as important as the gesture of sitting. I mean, you look at a guy like Isaiah Crowell, who tweeted out a picture of a cop getting his throat slashed, and he gets, he says, okay, gets almost no backlash for it, because he says, I'm going to donate one game check to the Dallas Police Department. So that's just my take, man.
For me, without getting super political or hyper emotional about the situation, for me, it comes down to a couple of things. And I look at what he's doing, and I see a really big show of hypocrisy. And what I mean by that is he's protesting in a country, and one of the most sacred showing of respect to the country. He's protesting that because he has the freedom of speech in this country, and in very few other countries, if any, around the world, if a professional athlete were to show that kind of disrespect to their nation, whether it's in the Olympics, whether it's imagine athletes who go through their national anthem in international soccer play, or the other football, if you will, if they did a similar type of showing in some of these third world countries, communist countries, other countries that have people that are very oppressed, under some very kind of heavy dictatorship kind of rule. There's just a really big sense of hypocrisy there, that yes, he has the freedom of speech to be upset and be upset about some of these different and difficult situations that are going on in this country, and very divisive situations that are going on in this country. But he's refusing to see that he lives in a great country that allows him the freedom to be able to make this kind of protest. And that's kind of what bothers me about it and what he's doing. Just the hypocrisy behind it. And he's doing it. He's knowingly doing it on one of the biggest national and international platforms, because American football is one of, if not, it's one of the most popular sports in the world, aside from soccer or football. And he knows that, and he's using that platform to do that. And that's okay. He has the freedom to do that. However, he's playing a game that pays him more money than many, many, many other people in this world receive, much less in the USA. So I have not only just the respect issue, I see a hypocrisy issue with what Colin Kaepernick is doing. And, this is also a sport that really, if you remember 15 years ago and up really until this point, has really rallied around the 9/11 attacks and all of that. They have the flag sticker on the helmets, and they really, all sports in this country have really rallied around that, and it really brought the country out of some really tough times. And I think that's now looked at in the rearview mirror with some of the things that Kaepernick is doing. He has the freedom to do that. That's what makes this country great, and he's expressing himself the way he wants to do that, and he's within his means to do that. I don't agree with it. I don't like the sign of disrespect. And there's a number of military veterans who probably agree with me, but that's kind of my stance. I see some hypocrisy. I see kind of a usage of a platform that not many others have in a way to further his platform there. But he does have the right to do it.
That's fair.
One thing Connor mentioned about how no one had really noticed it, which is interesting. In the article, I mentioned a couple other examples in the past where a similar protest had happened. I think Carlos Delgado in baseball refused to stand during the playing of God Bless America during the seventh inning in the early 2000s, a couple years after 9/11. And then there was the NBA player who back in, I think it was 96, wouldn't stand after he had converted him to Islam and wasn't standing for the anthem. And in both those cases, when you read the interviews, neither one really seemed to, it didn't seem to bother anyone, because no one seemed to notice it, because, there's a lot of people moving around, there's trainers, there's things happening. And sometimes it's, you're looking at the flag, you're not even looking at the players. But when they got interviewed and mentioned it, that was when all hell broke loose and everyone kind of went crazy. And I know in the NBA, they came up with a compromise with, I think initially he got fined and maybe benched, and then the union stepped in and they agreed that he would stand, but he could say a Muslim prayer. And so you can find photos and pictures of him kind of doing a posture of a Muslim prayer while he's standing. And I'm guessing with Kaepernick, you don't know what'll happen, but I'm guessing they may come up with some sort of compromise. And the kneeling looked like it might have been a compromise, like, I just won't flat out sit, but I'll kind of do a kneeling is, some people look at kneeling as kind of a reverent thing, but you're not standing. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening. And if more people join in, and where it kind of goes from there.
Yeah. It's setting a dangerous precedent in not only for the NFL, but for other sports. I read somewhere that Colin Kaepernick, who fell from grace in terms of his play over the last year and a half, his jersey sales are now around the highest that they've ever been because of over the last couple of weeks, because of what he's done here. And now you wonder about the trickle down effect of what he's doing. If other athletes are going to do that, will they be allowed to do that? And, I just think it sets a dangerous precedence for something that, I don't know. Again, as I mentioned, I feel like we live in a pretty good country that has a ton. There are a lot of issues, and Kaepernick is right in raising awareness to some of these issues that have been going on. But I'm not comfortable with the way that he is expressing it in what he's doing. And but again, what makes this country great is he has the freedom to do so.
That's fair. And we saw, I believe it was Eric Reed, his safety, or his teammate who's played safety, also joined him, as well as Jeremy Lane, who's a corner on the Seahawks. Yep. So it'll be interesting to see what happens down the road.
Yep. Well, it's not a Bengals issue, but it's an important one for football, and a very interesting, divisive topic that we could probably have our own show, if not our own podcast on this issue. But it's a good topic. Thanks for bringing that up, Scott.